When we first met with my wife, I admired that about her. She had this laser focus, this determination that made everyone around her believe she'd go far. And she did. Over the past 5 years, I've watched her climb the corporate ladder at a speed that seemed unreal. Promotions, bonuses, recognition. She collected them all like trophies. First, I was proud. I bragged to friends, saying, "She's killing it at work, she's unstoppable." But as her career rose, her presence at home started to vanish. Dinners went from warm conversations to her scrolling through emails with a glass of wine. Bedtime became her laptop glowing on the nightstand while I fell asleep alone. Our weekends turned into networking events or work trips. And slowly, the woman I married stopped being my partner and started being an executive in a suit who just happened to share my house. Back then, I told myself it was just a phase, that all this grinding and sacrifice would pay off, and then maybe we'd reconnect. But I didn't realize that the sacrifice she had in mind wasn't just hers. It was ours. The first red flag didn't come from her. It came from my phone. One night, around 11 p.m., I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got me. On the other end was a man's voice, low and kind of nervous. "Hey, is she with you? Or, still at the hotel?" I froze. He said her name, my wife's name. I asked who the hell was calling, and there was this pause, then he hung up. My stomach dropped. I told myself it was some kind of mistake, maybe a drunk dial. But the way he said her name? Too casual, too familiar. Then the whispers started. At a friend's barbecue, one of her coworkers, tipsy and not realizing who I was, joked to someone else about how the boss and his favorite employee are basically inseparable these days. I caught the tail end of the comment, and when I introduced myself as her husband, the guy's face turned pale. He changed the subject so fast it was almost comical. That night I couldn't shake it. My wife had been working later and later, coming home smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't mine. I started piecing things together, but every time I thought I had enough to confront her, I doubted myself. Until the messages showed up. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the universe decided to shove the truth in my face. I was working from home, and her iPad buzzed on the counter. Normally, she kept it locked, but this time, by some miracle, it wasn't. The preview showed a message from her boss. Just one line. Dinner was productive. Same place tomorrow. My hands were shaking when I opened it. There weren't hundreds of messages, but enough to paint the picture. Words like late meeting, keep this between us, and even a damn winking emoji. The kind of messages that were vague enough to be excused as work, but intimate enough that I knew what was happening. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I started listening more carefully. I noticed how her phone always seemed to be face down on the table. How she stepped outside to take work calls. How she suddenly cared about what she wore to the office again, spending half an hour in front of the mirror, something she hadn't done in years. And then there were the rumors. A colleague of hers, someone I'd met once at a holiday party, quietly reached out to me. He didn't say much, just that people are talking, and that I should be careful. When I asked him to explain, he said, "Let's just say your wife and the boss aren't exactly subtle anymore." That was the moment denial stopped being an option. I finally broke one night when she came home at nearly midnight, hair perfect, lipstick smudged just enough to not be work appropriate. She tossed her bag on the chair and said she was exhausted from meetings. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I'd seen the messages, that I knew about the rumors, that people at her company were laughing behind her back. And mine. She didn't flinch, didn't even look guilty. Instead, she sighed, poured herself a glass of wine and said, "You're overreacting. It's just business. Do you have any idea how much leverage he has over my career? How many doors this opens for me?" I swear, my jaw almost hit the floor. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't apologizing. She was rationalizing it, like sleeping with her boss was the same as staying late to finish a spreadsheet. When I pressed, she got cold. Said I wouldn't understand, because I don't live in her world. That if I loved her, I'd support whatever it takes for her to succeed. It was like I wasn't her husband anymore. I was just dead weight she had to drag along on her way to the top. I don't think I've ever felt smaller than in that moment. You spend years building a life with someone, sharing bills, dreams, inside jokes, Sunday mornings in bed, and suddenly you realize you're nothing more than a pawn in their strategy game. That's how it felt. She didn't cry. She didn't beg me not to leave. She just carried on. Like I was a nuisance. Like my hurt was an inconvenience. When I asked if she even loved me anymore, she shrugged and said, "Love doesn't pay the bills. Stability comes from power." Those words are burned into my skull. I started seeing myself through her eyes. Disposable, replaceable, irrelevant. My friends could tell something was wrong. I stopped laughing, stopped going out. I felt like I'd been gutted. Worse, every time my phone rang, I half expected it to be another slip-up call meant for her. Every event she said she had to attend felt like a stage for her affair. Every minute she wasn't home was another knife in my chest. And the bitter part? She didn't even try to hide anymore. If the betrayal at home was bad, the humiliation in public was worse. I went to a company event with her, one of those bring your spouse, mingle with the executives kind of nights. I thought maybe showing up would remind her that I was still here, that I was part of her life. Big mistake. The whispers started the second we walked in. I could feel the eyes, the smirks, the pity. One guy I'd never met actually patted me on the shoulder and said, "Hang in there, buddy." I didn't even know what to say. I just stood there, humiliated, while she laughed and sipped champagne like she was untouchable. And then I saw them together, my wife and her boss. The way he touched her arm when he leaned in. The way she tilted her head back when she laughed. Just a little too comfortable, a little too familiar. It wasn't two colleagues networking. It was two lovers enjoying a private joke in a crowded room. And everyone saw it. Everyone. On the drive home, I didn't say a word. She, on the other hand, complained about how I was being moody and how I made things awkward. Like I was the problem. That was the night I realized this wasn't just my marriage falling apart. It was my dignity being dragged through the mud, one rumor at a time. There's only so much a man can swallow before something inside snaps. After that company event, I tried, God knows I tried, to keep playing along. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, if I was patient, she'd come back down to earth. That the ambition would burn itself out and she'd remember we were supposed to be partners. But she just got bolder. Later nights. More business trips. Less and less effort to even acknowledge me. The final straw came one weekend when she said she had to work late on a Saturday. Hours ticked by. I sat there in an empty house, staring at our wedding photos, wondering what kind of fool I was. Then, around midnight, I got a call from a blocked number. A man's voice, low and amused, said, "You really think she's at the office right now?" Then he laughed and hung up. I don't know who it was. A coworker, a friend of her boss, someone who just wanted to twist the knife. But that was it for me. I realized I wasn't just losing my wife. I was being made into a public joke. That night, I decided something had to change. When she came home that night, hair messy, heels in her hand, smelling like whiskey and someone else's cologne, I didn't hold back. I told her flat out, either it stops or we're done. No more excuses. No more just business. No more late-night meetings. She could have her career, but she couldn't keep destroying me in the process. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't even look shocked. She just stared at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Then she said, "You're not in a position to give me ultimatums. Do you have any idea what I'm building? What I'm risking? If you can't handle it, maybe you're not meant to be with someone like me." Like me. That phrase cut deeper than anything else. She wasn't just choosing him. She was choosing the life he represented. The power, the climb, the connections. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was a liability. I realized then that the ultimatum wasn't really mine to give. She had already made her choice. After that confrontation, the house turned into a museum of silence. We barely spoke. Meals were eaten in separate rooms. She buried herself in work. Phone calls, emails, endless strategy meetings. I buried myself in bitterness. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was worse. It was apathy. She didn't even bother pretending to care what I thought. If anything, my ultimatum had confirmed her narrative. That I was too small-minded, too emotional, too ordinary for the world she wanted. At night, I'd hear her typing away in the other room, the glow of her laptop spilling under the door. I used to think of that light as a symbol of her ambition. Now it felt like a lighthouse warning me to stay away. The distance wasn't just emotional, it was physical. She stopped reaching for me in bed, stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings, stopped asking about my day. The worst part? I started to feel like a ghost in my own home, like I'd already been written out of her story, and she was just waiting for the right time to erase me completely. The silence gave me too much time to think, and when you're sitting alone night after night, you start weighing your options in ugly ways. Part of me wanted to just walk, file for divorce, cut my losses, and never look back. Clean break. No more humiliation. No more wondering where she really was when she didn't come home. Just freedom. But the other part of me burned for something darker. Exposure. If she could treat me like a stepping stone, why should I protect her image? Why should I let her boss keep his reputation intact while I played the fool? I thought about forwarding those messages to HR, about crashing one of their business dinners and airing everything out in public, about making sure everyone who whispered about me also knew the full truth about her. Revenge or escape, that's what it boiled down to. And the sad thing? I wasn't even sure which one would hurt me less. In the end, I chose myself. I didn't stage a dramatic reveal. I didn't forward messages or make a scene at work events. I packed my things one quiet Sunday while she was out on a business brunch with him. I left a note on the kitchen counter. I loved you. I thought you loved me. I was wrong. Goodbye. It was the first time in months I felt a flicker of control. No more being invisible in my own home. No more letting her ambition masquerade as love. No more pretending that what we had was anything other than a lie. The divorce proceedings were ugly as expected. She waved her career like a shield, lawyers on retainer trying to minimize financial losses. I stayed silent, letting her wear herself out. For once, I didn't fight her battles. I let the cold, pragmatic reality of our situation do the work for me. By the time the papers were signed, I realized something important. Sometimes love and ambition don't just diverge. They collide, and one of you ends up crushed. The days after the divorce were like wading through fog. I'd built a life around someone who had treated me like a placeholder. Someone who had smiled at me while quietly planning her next move with someone else. The betrayal left a dull ache that no busy schedule or social distraction could shake. Friends tried to cheer me up, but their words felt hollow. You deserve better, they said. But the truth was, I didn't know what better looked like anymore. I'd trusted, I'd invested, and I'd lost. Not just a marriage, but a version of myself that believed in partnership, loyalty, and shared dreams. I spent nights replaying moments trying to understand where it all went wrong. The messages, the whispered rumors, her cold rationalizations, all of it combined into a bitter cocktail of grief and resentment. And yet, somewhere under that bitterness, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. Pain, yes, but also the realization that I no longer had to measure my life against her ambitions, her games, her cold calculations. I was free. The strange how betrayal changes your perspective. You start noticing things you never did before, how ambition can be a cloak for selfishness, how love can be conditional, and how easily a marriage can be sacrificed for a career. I used to admire her drive. Now I see it differently. Her coldness wasn't just ambition. It was a willingness to discard anything or anyone that didn't directly serve her goals. Our marriage wasn't a partnership. It was collateral damage. I've realized that mixing love and career is a dangerous gamble. Passion can fuel achievement, yes, but unchecked, it can also destroy what you thought was sacred. The lessons are bitter, but they're real. Trust is fragile, and love is meaningless if it's weighed against power. I can't tell myself I'll ever forgive her, but I can tell myself I'll survive. And maybe, someday, I'll learn to love again without mistaking ambition for affection. Rebuilding wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy. For weeks, I felt like I was navigating a world that had been reshaped without my consent. I changed routines, moved some of my belongings, and even started considering a new city, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of her shadow. I focused on myself. Work became a tool for distraction rather than a battlefield. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I started exercising again, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned when my marriage became all-consuming. Every small step was a reminder that I could exist, and even thrive, outside of her orbit. Dating? Not yet. I'm cautious, scarred. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I could be open to it when the time comes. I'm learning boundaries. I'm learning to protect my heart. I'm learning that my self-worth doesn't depend on someone else's approval or ambition. And slowly, the fog lifted. The anger is still there, sure, but it no longer controls me. The betrayal has become a lesson, not a chain. Looking back, I can see the pattern now. Ambition is intoxicating, but when it overshadows empathy, love becomes collateral. I learned the hard way that some people wear loyalty like a costume. They'll shed it the moment it no longer suits their goals. I also learned about resilience. You can be blindsided by deceit, humiliated by gossip, and abandoned by someone you trusted, and still find the strength to reclaim your life. Pain teaches clarity, and betrayal teaches boundaries. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust in the same way again, but I've learned to trust myself, to prioritize my dignity, my heart, and my sanity over anyone else's ambitions. Love and career can coexist, but only when respect is mutual, when transparency exists, and when one person doesn't treat the other like a stepping stone. I hope my story serves as a caution. Don't ignore the signs, and never let someone's climb come at the cost of your own soul.